Hi, folks. Back in the Cobb TV studios this week with our weekly chat with Chairman Mike Boyce, who you have your traveling clothes on, it looks like.
I did. I just got back from a very short weekend in France. As you know, this is Memorial Day weekend, and normally I attend the Memorial Day program at the Marietta National Cemetery. But this year was the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Belleau Wood. And being a Marine, obviously that battle meant a lot, to me. And there's an American cemetery there, which literally hundreds of our fallen heroes are buried there. This one battle had over 5,000 killed and wounded during this battle in May and June of 1918. So I decided to go out there and pay my respects to our Marines and soldiers during that weekend. And it was a remarkable weekend for a number of reasons. First of all, I was just so amazed at how many people attended the ceremony. Obviously, there were Americans there, but there were a lot more Frenchmen there, and they brought their families. And I was just struck by the fact that there were young families with their kids. I'm easily guessing there were at least 1,000 people at this ceremony, if not more. And the pomp and circumstance, obviously, with the soldiers and the Marines there, all in their uniforms, the bands. It was a very moving ceremony, but I think it also shows that we never forget that these men deserve our time to take a break from our life, to recognize what they did to save freedom. And they fought in a land that wasn't theirs, but yet they fought, there was close enough of a relationship with Europe that they felt that we should go over there and fight for them, and a lot of them paid the price. So it was a very, very great weekend. I'm glad I took the time, and again, I can't say enough for all those who gave the ultimate sacrifice.
You mentioned you met a lot of people from France, but you probably met some people you'd never met before from this country.
There were obviously a lot of expatriates who live overseas. And we have a large contingent of Marines in the Army and sailors and Air Force that are assigned to what we call the joint commands in Europe. And a lot of them were at the ceremony also. There were Army flag officers from the Americans, from the French, and from the Germans were also there. The Germans have a small cemetery down the road leading up to Belleau Wood from the south. So again, war is an instrument of policy, and unfortunately it's a violent one and involves savagery and involves dying. And those who paid that price, regardless of the side they're on, I think it shows a lot for who we are, that we pay respects to both sides and bury them with reverence and treat their cemeteries accordingly.
You were traveling not just overseas, but a little bit around here as well. You mentioned you had some time with Glenn and the Cobb County Marietta Water Authority.
Yes, well, believe it or not, the Marietta Water Authority and our own water system, another great example of they do things so well that we take for granted. When you turn on your tap water, it's astounding the infrastructure that's behind that benefit that we have here. That's a safe benefit above all things. Well, a number of years ago, Cobb County is part of the Cobb Marietta Water Authority. We buy our water wholesale from this authority. And then we use that water to put it into your system that gets to your house. And then when the water goes down the drain or wherever, we're the one that cleans up the water and puts it back into the Chattahoochee or into Lake Allatoona. And it has to go back in there, clean it when it came out. But when it comes in, it's spectacularly clean, because that's what the Cobb Marietta Water Authority does. They give us clean water. And a number of years ago, they built a reservoir up by Canton that's over 511 acres, and it stores over 5 billion gallons of water. It's held back by a dam that's over 180 feet tall. And I went up there to get a tour of that reservoir. And it's just astounding, the engineering that went into that whole dam. They just took a big chunk of land, and they got water, out of the Etowah and other places, water flowing down from the mountains, and they filled this reservoir. It's obviously, with the rains we've been having here lately, there's a lot of water coming down the dam, and that's what you see in the picture here. Yeah. But on a quiet day in August, it's just a big serene pond, and you're allowed to fish in there, but there's no powered boats allowed in there. There's no sailing boats allowed. No one's allowed to swim in there. It's another remarkable thinking of thinking ahead of a potential problem you might have during a drought, and how we're always going to ensure that you're going to have water when you turn on the tap.
I think most people just assume that Cobb County taps the river, taps the lake on their own, but as you mentioned, we deal with this authority who also has other customers.
They do, absolutely. We're not the only customer. Obviously, Cherokee County, Douglas County, some cities around here over in Fulton. It's a remarkable authority. By virtue of my position as a chairman, I'm on the board. But it is a really well-run authority. Terrific director in Glenn Page, and a great staff. So we're very lucky, again, to have another outstanding benefit program here in Cobb that lets us lead a high-quality life.
Well, before you know it, we're already into June, and June means some town halls are coming up, and I know we're all preparing for that and the message that we want to get out to folks.
Yeah, our first town hall is a little bit more than 2 weeks from now. And I think today, like I promised last week, I'd just like to give you a brief story of how we got where we are. And then when we come back next time, I'll give you an idea of what I'm going to be proposing to the board when we do our retreat on June 13th.
12th.
June 12th, I'm sorry. June 13th.
We have another meeting on the 13th.
For June 13th, that's the stakeholder meeting for the transit, but June 12th, the afternoon of June 12th, the board will be talking about the budget. So let's just briefly go over what I've been talking about here verbally for the last several months. But let me give you some graphics here, some visual idea of what I've been talking about. And this is our millage rate over the years. As you can see, 25 years ago, a little more than 25 years ago, we were at 12.22 mils. And last year, our millage rate collectively went to 9.85. So we're 3 mils, about 3 mils, 2.5 mils less than where we were 27 years ago. And that represents somewhere in the neighborhood of about $60 million. And it's how we pay for that lesser amount. That's the real story here. As you can see on the chart, we started in 1990 to lower the millage rate by transferring money from the water fund. So over time, we allowed that millage rate to go from 12.22 down to a lower rate. And then in the early part of this century, we started moving some of our general fund projects into the SPLOST. So SPLOST dollars paid for those, which allowed us to lower millage rate even more. And then, of course, during the recession, we raised our millage rate to reflect the shortness in resources because the value of housing went down. And then over time, we start to lower the millage rate even lower. So the bottom line here is that we've had a lower millage rate even though our population has increased by over 300,000 people. And I know people are going to say, well, that's 300,000 more people, that's a lot more houses, but as we've been saying for months now, because of the floating homestead exemption, we don't get the full benefit of that. Our spending per capita has gone down over the last 15 years. In 2004, as you can see from the chart, we spent over $600 a person, and now in 2018, we're $100 less per person. That has to translate into buying fewer things in an environment when things cost more. So you can do the math. If you're spending less on things that cost more, that means you're buying less of something. We deferred a fancy term for deferring capital replacement. We simply didn't buy cars, fleet vehicles. We didn't renovate buildings. Over 300 of our vehicles in our fleet right now are beyond their service life. And that involves both cars and trucks and things of that nature. Moreover, we added over 270 police cars because we did the take-home program, and yet we didn't increase the size of our maintenance department to maintain those cars.
Right. I was shocked when I learned our average age of our fleet's 11 years. So when you consider that, half the fleet's more than 11 years old.
That's correct, right. And that's, again, over time, just like at your house, you know, if you have a car that's over 10 years old, and I'm sure a lot of them do, I have a car that's over 10 years old, over time, you have to start fixing them. And every time I go in to fix my car, it costs me $1,000. And eventually you do the math. How many of these $1,000 repairs are you gonna pay for before you finally realize it's time to buy a new car? And we're in the same predicament right now. The millage rate dropped over time here, and as we saw here, our revenue fell behind our expenditures. So as you look at this chart, you'll see the numbers that are in red. And the way we paid for that red is that we simply borrowed from our reserves. So there's because of the way the budget's set up, we managed to save some money at the end of every year because some things come up because of the nature of the program where we don't fund those programs in the year we thought we were going to. Sometimes there are federal restrictions on them. Sometimes there are events that come out that prevent us from buying it, and we never spend money unless we're prepared for it. So at the end of every year, we always have some money left over that we can use to buy some items that we weren't able to put into the budget. But the reality is that amount has gotten smaller every year because every department has realized that if they don't spend the money, then we're going to take the money from them. And that's the first thing you learn when you go to budget. You better spend your money, because if you don't, whoever owns that money is going to take it from you and give it to somebody else. And you can see last year in 2018, we took almost $20 million from other sources of funding. And I think another thing that's important to remember is that this last month the board approved our purchasing the temporary anticipatory notes, the TANs, to fund our bridge between when we stopped collecting our funds and when we started collecting our funds again in September. That $90 million in TANs came out to $400,000 in interest. So little here, little there, after all, adds up to a lot of money. And right now this chart shows us that we simply have no more buckets left to raid, and I have no way to replace that $19 million unless I raise the millage rate.
And as you go to the next chart, a lot of people have asked too, we've got an emergency fund that we have to have,
right,
that we still have.
Right, but we don't touch that.
Right.
Because the moment we touch that, two things are going to happen. Our rating agencies are going to say, okay, why did you touch it? And it better be because of some catastrophic event that we hadn't planned on, like we had a tornado, God forbid, or some other kind of nature-related element that we simply had to throw money at to fix. Like we had the flood in 2009, all right? But they're telling us that, okay, we understand that, but how are you going to replace that? And you better replace that not next year, but right now. So again, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. If you touch the fund, the rating agencies are going to say something, and if they agree with it, then you got to show them that you're going to replace that money. And if you don't replace that money, then the next time around, when it comes time to be having your rating looked at again, they will lower your millage rate, and that $90 million, that $400,000 I spent to borrow money this year will be higher. There are consequences for for touching the big 9% reserve. And right now, what you see here, rating Cobb's reserve, you see what we did in the last 5 years is that we always took money in various buckets that were out there to pay for our shortfall. And in fiscal year 17, which was last year, we really rated the fund big time to pay for things. Fortunately, we had set some money aside, so that graph right here doesn't really show that we had to take it from a bucket that was sitting there. There were some buckets that we knew we were going to have to use, like to pay for the pay study, all right? So that's about a third of that $26 million. But nonetheless, there's still a significant amount of money that we had to use to balance our budget. Because unlike the federal government, I can't borrow to balance my budget. I have to pay for my budget using millage rate or other funds. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, fiscal year 19, we have no other buckets left. But if we want to stay at the same millage rate, then I need to know what services you want me to cut, and if you want me to protect the services, then I'm going to be asking you for more money via millage rate. So that's the long and short of it. Bottom line is we didn't get here overnight. We've known for the last 4 years about this problem. And ladies and gentlemen, that 4 years is over. The time now of reckoning has arrived. And I'm just simply telling everyone that I can is that I want you to tell me what direction you want me to go. If you do not want to have your taxes raised, I want you to tell me which services you want me to cut. And let's not be cute about this. I could close every library, every senior center, probably half the parks, and I still wouldn't get to $30 million. What is the price for a five-star county? And just to maintain what we have right now without fixing any other problems, it's $30 million, which is 1.1 mil. But the bottom line is, as you saw from these charts, we've had some expenditures that we simply haven't been funding, like the cars and renovating, and we have to address those. So when I say 1.1 mil, that's just to maintain what we have right now. It doesn't start to solve the problem. It just delays the problem for another year, which allows my fleet to age by one more year, which makes our replacement even more expensive.
So these charts help explain how we got here, and in the process from here on out, and especially the town halls, is where do we go from here?
Exactly. And so next time when we sit down here, we're going to bring back the famous pie charts, and we're going to show you, okay, this is what the services are that you've come to expect in the past. And the new price tag for that is about $430 million, which is what a 1.1 mil buys you. But I also want to bring back to the table that we have some things on the, out there that we believe have to be funded, which is so when I mention in the media sources that it may go higher than 1.1, it's because the commissioners are now seeing, as I have seen since last fall, that the 1.1 mil, that just simply puts the finger in the dike. And there's a lot of pressure building up behind the dike that, that has to be addressed. And we really need to stand up to the plate here and make the hard call, which I believe is the right call, which is to fund those programs that we've identified through our budget process over the last 8 months. And fund, not all of them, of course, that you never fund everything that you want in government, but what is a reasonable amount of millage rate that continues to make this a county where we can safely work, live, play, and pursue our dreams.
We received a few calls this week, too, about people that are somewhat not confused, but don't understand the town halls versus the public hearings and how that whole thing's going to work out. Well,
the public hearings are mandated by law. We have to have 3 millage rate hearings and 3 budget hearings. So what we're doing this year is that we're gonna combine them. We're not gonna have a 2-for-1. I still have to have time allotted on the agenda at the board meetings just to discuss millage, and I have to have a time assigned on the agenda just to discuss budget. So there will be two opportunities for 3 different board meetings to talk about those 2 subjects. But you can't possibly talk about an issue of this magnitude at 3 public hearings. The number's just too big, the issues are just too complicated, which is why I'm going on the road with this town hall. This town hall is meant to complement or supplement the required budget and millage rate hearings that the law requires me to do before I pass it, submit it to the board for passing.
And I know we don't always do it this way, but it's going to be a budget and millage rate during the same meeting.
The same meeting, and then right now we're looking at our last meeting in July, voting on both because they're connected. If we agree on the budget that we want to have, then that's going to have a connected millage rate with it, and we should vote on it the same night.
And people may ask, why not wait if there's still some doubt or uncertainty?
Well, for one thing, I have to have the millage rate by the end of July because it has to go to the state to be approved, and then once it's approved, then I can start collecting taxes. So the premier issue is the millage rate, but it makes no sense to pass the millage rate and not have a budget associated with it. All right. In other words, it doesn't make any sense to go back and untie 9 months of effort over the next 2 months. It just doesn't make any sense to do that because all you're doing is just, opening up doors. I realize the budget's not static, but you have to eventually draw a line in the sand and say, okay, look, this is our millage rate, and this is what we're buying for that millage rate. It makes no sense to break the 2 off together into 2 separate meetings.
All right. Well, I think right after the retreat, the charts that you just showed here will be up on a public website for everybody to see and take in. We've also got the list of the 7 town halls, the 3 public hearings, and ways you can have your voice heard in this budget debate as we go forward. So please definitely check those out and send in your emails whenever you want, and we will see you next week.
We'll be back.